I never thought I'd say this too soon, if ever. Apple has always had an edge over the Android competition. The raw performance delivered by their processors, always more powerful than anything Qualcomm or MediaTek could come up with for any Android phone. This convinced many to stick with the Apple ecosystem or migrate to it. Apps ran smoothly, the overall experience was fluid, well, except for the 60Hz screens that lingered on iPhones for years. But anyway, we must admit that performance has always been a convincing argument for iPhones. Year after year, for many years now, Apple managed to ensure that their devices had just enough extra power to remain unmatched even by Android models released the following year. In September, when the new iPhone 16 was launched, things seemed to follow the same trend. I'm aware that synthetic tests don't tell the whole story, but they provide some measurable benchmarks. Well, in Geekbench 6, the most powerful Android processor of that moment, the well-known Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, managed to score, under the best conditions and on the most powerful Android phones, just over 7,000 points in multi-core. My new iPhone 16 Pro Max scored without breaking a sweat over 8200 on the first run. That's almost 1000 points more than the most powerful processor in the Android ecosystem at that time. And you'd think that a 1000 point lead, which translates to a double-digit percentage advantage, would be enough to ensure dominance over what the competition might release in the near future, especially considering that processor performance improvements in recent years have been rather incremental. Right? Wrong. Because just yesterday, something dropped on my desk. This. So, what the heck is this? It's the brand new ROG Phone 9 Pro, the most powerful phone ever. It looks just like the old one, but it is the first phone equipped with the brand new Snapdragon 8 Elite, which is, as of now, the most powerful phone chipset in the world, and by a considerable margin from the aforementioned iPhone 16 Pro. It's an unbelievable feat what Qualcomm has managed to achieve. The new Snapdragon 8 Elite is clear proof that the coveted crown for raw power is no longer in Apple's garden, but has been outright stolen by Qualcomm. And despite its last year's appearance, the ROG Phone 9 Pro isn't just that. It comes with other improvements and extra features that make it the most solid gaming phone ever. And with that said, stay tuned to find out if the ROG Phone 9 Pro is worth it or not. Before we get to the chipset discussion, which I'm sure many of you are eagerly awaiting, let me keep you in suspense a bit longer as we talk about design and construction, two aspects that, at first glance at least, haven't changed from the previous generation. The new model has more or less the same dimensions, the same shape, and is made from roughly the same materials. It's a glass and aluminum sandwich, and the camera module on the back is also similar to last year's model. Even the anime matrix display on the back remains, and I absolutely love it. But the number of LEDs that make it up has doubled from 341 to 648. This translates into a better resolution, meaning you can put more stuff on it. Besides various animations, you can now also add custom GIFs now, and it even supports multilingual text display. I find this finally useful because, for example, when your phone is face down on the table and someone calls you, this 8-bit screen can even display the contact's name. Cool. With this fun display, you can also quickly see other informations such as battery level, time, and it notifies you when you get notifications. You can even play games on this display, and that's no joke. Space Invaders, Snake, Pong, and a few other iconic retro games are available right from launch. It's not a game-changing feature, but it's the only phone on the market with such a gimmick, and this gives it personality. And now let's finally dive into what truly matters: the chipset. The king is dead, long live the king. Initially, I approached this topic with some skepticism. In the weeks leading up to the launch of the new Snapdragon 8 Elite processor, I saw countless articles and posts speculating that the new chip would be almost 50% faster than the previous generation, smashing all benchmarks in raw performance, efficiency, and AI. And believe it or not, the 8 Elite is indeed a big deal, with incredible performance leaps compared to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. To better illustrate what I mean, let's talk numbers. The Asus Zenfone 11 Ultra, equipped with the 8 Gen 3, scored 2,305 points in single core and 7,141 points in multi-core in Geekbench 6, respectable values, but way behind the iPhone 16 Pro Max, which boasts over 8,000 points in multi-core. Well, Snapdragon 8 Elite achieved a staggering 10,203 points in multi-core on the first run. Yes, you heard right, the psychological barrier of 10,000 points has been utterly shattered, and that's no small feat. I honestly can't remember the last time I saw such significant performance jumps between generations. And don't think the single-core performance is lacking either. From 2,305 points on the 8 Gen 3 to 3,214 on the 8 Elite, a difference of roughly 50% in favor of the new chipset. It's worth noting that these results were achieved using the phone's X mode, which slightly boosts CPU and GPU frequencies in search of peak performance. Yes, we can say that at this moment, this ROG Phone 9 Pro edition is the fastest phone in the world, not just the fastest Android phone as before. In normal use, this phone simply breezes through any task, and no scenario can make it break a sweat. Apps open instantly, and the 24 gigs of RAM on this phone makes multitasking also a breeze, and the gargantuan 1TB storage I guess is enough for anyone. However, it's worth noting that the ROG Phone 9 Pro is also available in a more reasonable configuration with only 16 gigs of RAM and only 512 GB of storage. And now let's move on with the tests. ROG Phone is a device dedicated to gaming, an area where the graphics chip matters more than the processor itself. And before we get to games, let's see how the new chipset performs in the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme test. Just like before, I was blown away by the results. With a score of nearly 6,000 points, 5,922 to be precise, the ROG Phone 9 Pro is also the phone with the fastest GPU in the world. For context, the S24 Ultra with the 8 Gen 3 scores 4,400 points, which is significantly less. This translates here into a gaming experience unmatched by any other model currently available, and I'll say it loud and clear. If gaming is your primary activity on your phone, don't hesitate. This is the ultimate phone for this noble activity. The performance leap is so large that any game will feel like a joke on this phone. It had no trouble whatsoever running Call of Duty Warzone Mobile at maximum settings with no lag, stutter or freezing of any kind. And combined with a few AI tricks introduced by Asus for gamers, the experience was flawless. I was also impressed with the temperatures, which remained within decent limits even during the longest and most intense gaming sessions. Asus boasts of an improved cooling system that lowers temperatures under load by a few degrees compared to last year's model. From our tests, I can say that the difference isn't huge. We're still talking about just a few degrees Celsius, but the back felt noticeably cooler to the touch. If you activate the X mode for gaming, the mercury in the thermometer rises, but thanks to the cooler included in the package of this Pro Edition phone, temperatures are no longer an issue. Additionally, this cooler adds some extra buttons that can be configured to your liking through the Armoury Crate app. But what good is all that power without a screen that can take advantage of it? Asus didn't skimp on the display, and the nearly 6.8-inch AMOLED panel is a gem. With an HBM of 1600 nits and a peak of 2500, the display is bright enough for any scenario, and the colors, contrast and response times are what you'd expect from an OLED. Excellent. And the refresh rate is just as impressive as the hardware. Are you ready for this? Up to 185 Hz in games and the classic 120 Hz in menus. The great screen combined with robust speakers makes the ROG Phone 9 Pro not just a killer gaming machine, but also a great device for multimedia consumption. Movies and series look and sound amazing, voices are well defined, and the explosions in action movies have punch. Plus, even the old headphone jack is present here, a bonus for gamers who want minimal audio latency. It's no surprise that any phone released at the end of 2024 comes also with a ton of AI features, and the ROG Phone 9 Pro is no exception. Beyond the usual tricks we've seen time and time again, like the ability to summarize emails and messages, real-time translation and so on, the ROG Phone 9 Pro also brings some goodies specific to gaming. I'm not the most avid mobile gamer, I have to admit, but I can't deny that Asus understands what this audience wants. For example, in games like Genshin Impact, you can make your character walk automatically pick up items from the ground, and even skip faster, boring conversations between characters. More than that, in titles like League of Legends Wild Rift and Mobile Legends Bang Bang, you can forget about unlocking abilities because the phone's AI can do it for you. It all relies on intelligent algorithms that decide which ability is most important and the most efficient way to progress. But this made me think that these additions might dilute the gaming experience. It's like removing the choice of skills from an RPG. Sure, you'll have the most powerful character possible, but it removes a layer of depth that many gamers appreciate, and I'm not sure that this is the best direction. Still, I'm also sure that many will opt for these crutches on the ROG Phone 9 Pro, especially in competitive titles where every advantage over opponents counts. Before we move on to discussing cameras, I want to review some other notable aspects of this phone, starting with the battery. The battery is large, at 5800 mAh, and combined with this surprisingly efficient chip, you can expect very good autonomy. If you're not constantly pushing the phone with gaming, 2 full days of battery life aren't out of the question. Of course, gaming autonomy decreases depending on the title you're running. If it's something intense like Genshin Impact or Call of Duty for long periods in X mode, the one for maximum performance, make sure you have the charger nearby. But if you're playing more casual titles that don't heavily tax the chipset, alongside basic activities like social media, movies and series, you can expect a full day of use without issues. I also appreciated that Asus continues to include a 65-watt power adapter in the box for fast charging. I admit I would have liked to see a higher speed considering the generous battery, but it's not a deal breaker. Wireless charging at 15 watt is also present, although, like with wired charging, it could have been better. The phone runs Android 15 out of the box, the latest version of Google's operating system. The less good news is that the ROG Phone 9 Pro will only receive 2 years of major Android updates and 5 years of security updates. While I'm not worried about the phone's security, just 2 years of Android updates is a bit short for a phone this expensive. But I'll tell you how much it costs a bit later. Until then, Asus's Android implementation isn't bad, but it's not great either. I encountered minor bugs and glitches here and there, nothing serious, but there's still some work to be done in terms of stability. And Armoury Crate, as we're used to, remains a weak link. It has a convoluted and somewhat hard to follow interface, sometimes my settings didn't save, and I hope Asus pays more attention to this aspect. As it stands now, the software experience is one of the few weaker points of this phone, but it's something that can be easily fixed with a software update. On another note, connectivity is solid, with support for Wi-Fi 7, the latest and fastest industry standard, alongside Bluetooth 5.4. And now we've arrived at the discussion about cameras, an area where gaming phones of the past haven't impressed, and the new ROG Phone 9 Pro is no exception. The highlight of the camera setup is undoubtedly the main 50-megapixel Sony Lithia 700 sensor, which takes good pictures in the right lighting. The detail level is good, typical of a large sensor, the dynamic range is wider than last year's main sensor, and the colors are somewhat natural. Asus brought back the gimbal system from the previous model, now even more stable. This means the lens can remain steady when capturing light for a photo, which is important, especially for nighttime shots. Otherwise, photos taken with the main lens show no image noise, and if you're not a details fanatic, the images produced by this camera are satisfactory. The same cannot be said about the telephoto camera, which seems to be exactly the same as last year's model, with a 32-megapixel sensor, and does not deliver equally good results. I don't know why, but the 3x zoom photos are noisier this year than last year, a sign that Asus still has work to do in terms of software processing and denoising. That said, the photos are not terrible. They have some detail and an accurate white balance. I also appreciated that the color tones are similar to those of the main lens, so the photos won't seem like they were taken with different phones. The 13-megapixel ultra-wide lens is also the same as on the ROG Phone 8 Pro, and it's the least impressive of them all. The low resolution translates into an overall softer image, and you'll get better results by stepping back a bit and using the main lens. When it comes to video, however, the gimbal stabilization helps a lot, and the clips look good. The phone also supports 8K recording, if that's your thing, at 30 FPS, but if you want a higher frame rate, you can record 4K in 60 FPS. The video quality isn't on par with an iPhone, but for a gaming phone, it's not bad at all. And finally, the price. So, how much does it cost? Let me be blunt. The new ROG Phone 9 Pro in the Pro Edition version we tested, with 24 gigs of RAM, 1TB storage and all the accessories included, costs $1,500, which isn't cheap. The base version with 16 gigs of RAM and no accessories is indeed cheaper, but if you want the best mobile gaming experience, there's no option that beats this top-tier ROG Phone 9 Pro Edition. The cameras could have been better, as could the software support with just 2 major Android updates, which is a bit disappointing for a phone costing $1,500. However, those who buy an ROG phone probably aren't quite interested in such details. They're focused on the power under the hood, and this phone really delivers. It is, without a doubt, the most powerful phone in the world, if that's what you're looking for. If you're not into gaming but still want a similar level of performance, it might be worth waiting a bit. In the coming months, more and more phones equipped with the new Snapdragon 8 Elite will be released. However, I'd say few will have the power and personality of this ROG Phone 9 Pro Edition, and I like this one because it is just different. It's absurdly fast, and that quirky 8-bit display on the back makes it downright fun and unique. And now let me hear your opinion in the comments. What do you think about this new ROG Phone 9 Pro Edition? And lastly, what do you think about this category of phones dedicated to gaming, in which the ROG Phone is undoubtedly the top dog? And with that said, we'll stop here. Subscribe to Techniqualities if you want to support us in any way. If not, that's fine too. Thank you anyway, and best of luck to you all.